History is what you make of it in Europa Universalis V. You are the ruler of your own story. As you play, you will shape the world. Through your economy, you'll manipulate markets. Through your army, you'll define new borders. And through your quill, you'll become a diplomatic hegemon. Today, the Europa Universalis community team will be sharing with you 2 such stories, taken from our time playing the development builds, and take you on a journey from 1337 to 1444. So join as I, Midgeman, and my wonderful colleague Clement take you on a journey via an AAR of our games as Flanders and Naples. As a reminder, all gameplay has taken place on development builds and may not be representative of final product playthroughs and the stories that you, the player, will inevitably tell in EU5. Now let's begin with my story in Flanders. Flanders in 1337 is a nation at a crossroads of potential power. They start as a vassal of the Crown of France and could easily stay as little more than that. But they begin with their own market in Bruges and a decently sized population, as well as some access to some very valuable RGOs. Today, we're going to tap that potential and attempt to become a bastion of trade and New World potential way ahead of the historical Netherlands, whilst, avoiding the wrath of England and France during the 100 Years' War. To start off, I set my cabinet of nobles to work, encouraging migration to the capital and increasing our control over West Flanders. We're going to build an innovative society with a capital economy and high education. So let's pull our peasants out of the fields a little. Also, we gave our peasants some rights, allowing them to own their own weapons. This is partially to increase the sale of weapons in my market, and for them to move freely through the country. This, however, did anger the nobles a little bit, but they'll be fine. We then called Parliament to increase our centralization, and we funded farming estates. Moving on to 1342, the Renaissance arrived and we focused on the admin group. We're also defending against England in the 100 Years' War. Many peasants are dying, and England does beat the French army and my forces separately. They divided and conquered here. This goes on for 4 years, landing us in 1346, when the war with England ends, France losing. But more worryingly than that, a black spectre forms over the world, and the Black Death begins in Dergachi. By 1349, the Black Death has killed 249,000 members of my population, and then 1 year later, France has exploded into turmoil with rebellion. Elsewhere in the world, by 1352, Hungary has also exploded into turmoil. 2 years further than that, 1354, England exploded into turmoil, and the Black Death ended. In 1357, I turned my attention to my union. As the Count of Flanders holds multiple territory at game start, I thought it wise to begin integrating some of those. So I started by voting for an established seniority. In 1358, we finally embraced the standing armies and banking institutions and worked towards starting a weapons industry. My plan here was to try and become an advanced but small army, one that wouldn't harm my population, but might help us get independence in the future. 1362, the second phase of the 100 Years' War began, and I decided to turn turncoat and white peace so that England didn't take any of my lands through a unique betrayal mechanic. By 1364, we had unlocked gunsmithing. It's time to stoke the fires and craft an industry of war. 10 years later, it's 1374. The industry is fired up, but England has declared war on France yet again. This time we decided to raise our troops, and our air rode into battle. France did lose, but we retained our land, and caused a lot of casualties along the way. 1379, England's back like a bad smell, and I, as an Englishman, now see how the French felt during this period. 1384, peace finally came again, and we unlocked armories, which is important for us to be able to build a standing army, rather than relying on a peasant levy all the time. 1396 and the 100 Years' War is still continuing, but it begins to go favorably as we grow in this phase. Thanks to our contributions, France rewards us with some Picard land. We have one of the most advanced militaries in the region, with cannon and gunpowder. By 1399, France goes to war with the Pope and is led by a regent. It's the turn of a new century in 1404 as we hit phase 4 of the 100 Years' War with a York on the throne. We discover universities as we continue to grow our education. Economically in this playthrough, I decided to focus on building scriptoriums and a vast paper-making industry, which not only do we use to fuel our advances, but we've begun supplying paper all across the world. Yet again, we decided to leave as a turncoat in this phase of the war and focused on educating our people. By 1408, our master plan had begun. We had begun crafting an independence war CB, and we have a new duke ready for war. In 1409, England goes to war with France again, and by 1410, we begin a war of independence, gaining our freedom from France. But we didn't stop there. 8 years later, we've just finished a war with Brabant, taking huge swaths of the Low Countries. With 2 more provinces, we'll be able to form the Netherlands. But we sit on a high level of antagonism. So for now, we're going to mind our economy for a couple of years. It's 1434. We've been sitting on our hands, but we've now used our parliament to gain a claim on South Holland. And by 1435, we're at war with Holland. In the very next year, one of our previous dukes is canonized by the Catholic Church, and by 1437, an age of discovery is upon us. We take another administrative focus. We get a new duke once again, and we claim an institution for the new world. And to celebrate, we deem ourselves a new nation, the nation of the Netherlands. By 1438, we gain another institution, gaining 2 from this age. Our advanced literacy making us the home of the printing press. In 1439, we decided to change our government to a Dutch parliament, getting rid of the clerics and giving more control to the burghers, and by 1440, we've embraced all the institutions of the age, leaving us ready for a new horizon in 1444.
Hey, hello everyone, it's Clem. It's my turn to introduce you to my game with Naples today. The game ran from 1337 to 1444, and Naples began the game at the edge of the Holy Roman Empire and in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, which makes it a really fun place to have a lot of different gameplay's potential. You can either go full diplomatic with every country that are around you, you can go full trade because you're perfectly in the middle of the Eastern and Western Mediterranean, or you can go full military and go for a conquest of Italy. Naples begin in union with Provence, Prato and Mondovì. But should the king, Robert d'Anjou, dies, the union would end because he has no male heir. So the first events of the game will revolve around the possibility of his daughter to ascend the throne once the king dies. But we're not there yet, and the first move are to improve the control around Salerno and stabilize the country, while I set up some reforms around the agricultural cultivation, because there is a huge lack of food at the beginning of the game on the Italian peninsula. So obviously my first objective will be around fixing this issue of the lack of food. That's why the first constructions are the development of the wheat RGOs to produce the most food possible. As soon as we start the game, there is 2 events. The first is the start of the situation of the Guelphs and Ghibellines. Naples is obviously the leader of the Guelphs, as it is the most powerful country in the faction. And the second event is the will of the King Robert the Wise. This event is making possible his daughter to ascend the throne once he's dead. As it is a historical decision, we're gonna follow up on that. 1 year later, in 1338, we obtain a claimed throne casus belli on Sicily. So why not immediately declare war on them? We levy the army, we have 33,000 men. Sicily is allied to Ascoli at the north, so I send one of my armies to siege Ascoli while the other is tasked to secure the south of the kingdom. But in the middle of the war, our king decides to die, setting up a regency for Giovanna d'Anjou that will last until 1344. In the meantime, the first battle happened at Cassano a Ligno, which chose to be the defender with a rather even force of the Sicilian army. End up losing this battle and falling back tactically. They will go forth and siege Salerno. This is at this moment that we will go around this army and take back everything that they controlled, so we can cut the supply line and make them starve at the bottom of our walls. This is where, in 1339, we will strike and defeat the big Sicilian army. Then, after turning this part of the war, we can finally set foot on Sicily and begin the siege of Messina. After that, there is no more resistance from the Sicilian, but as we are under a regency, we cannot enforce the casus belli of the claimed throne. So we have to wait up until 1344 to finally make peace with the Sicilian and get them into the fold. A few years later, in 1346, the Black Death appears, but yet nowhere to be seen on the map. This is at this time that we set the first step for the integration of the unions. And in 1349, the Black Death is still concentrated in the steppes and avoids Europe. But it was too good to be true, and it finally appears in the port of Sant'Arcangelo. The Black Death is finally here, but it won't last for too long, and only ravage Europe for a few years before disappearing. After that, we make a little jump to 1361, where we were dragged in a war against Mamluk by the Pope, strangely, to recover Mamluk territories in the middle of Provence. This war dragged for 5 years. 5 years of dull fights in Provence. In the end, the sheer numbers of the Mamluk prevailed, and they forced the Pope to renounce his alliance with us. That's when we decided to settle a little bit. That's now 1366. The first war were mostly successful, we have no direct enemy, so we can focus on economy. Our plan will be to become the first weapons, guns and cannon provider for the central Mediterranean and the Italian peninsula. But we only have one iron mine, so we'll fuel every single ducats we have into this iron mine, into our lumber production and into the infrastructure all around it. A few years later, we can finally construct a gun and cannons factory at the tip of the Italian boot. Following our marriages, it happens that our ruler's husband ascended on the throne of Serbia, making us a solid allies for the years to come. But our heir is still not in the inheritance line of Serbia. Maybe we'll have to wait a few generations. On the side of the weapon production, we'll also develop the saffron production, as it is a really valuable luxury good. In 1373, we look a little bit around us, and we see that France fell into a civil war with a great Jacquerie. A few years later, it is the turn of the Byzantine Empire to fall to a pretender coup that ended up forming the Byzantine Peasants Empire. Almost at the same time, we ultimately a claim on the throne of Croatia. So we obviously go for it, and we grab it in 1382. In 1390, finally, the Guelphs have triumphed. So every country in Italy will now leave the Holy Roman Empire that had, strangely, no more emperor. Maybe was it because all the members, all the electors couldn't vote for the same emperor. Back on the Italian peninsula, the Pope decided to excommunicate us. So we grab the first casus belli that comes around and declare war on the Papal States. Against all odds, because he has a lot of allies, we rush into war. They can raise a lot of levies, but now that we have guns, we can raise more than 1,000 professional troops that usually are no match for the levies. The first battle against Florence shows the difference between an only levies army and another with a professional corps. In the middle of the war, the final step of the unification policy is ratified, and we can now start integrating Sicily, which was not dragged into the war with us. We are 5 years into the war now. It dragged for a little bit longer than expected because of a back and forth, but we finally managed to breach the fortification of the Papal States and ended up claiming Benevento, Campania, and asking for the dismantling of the Rome fortress. At the turn of the century, the weapon industry is really paying off, as creating handgunners and cannon regiments is very cheap compared to other countries. In 1422, with the annexation of new territories, a civil war starts with some nobles, discontent with their new leader. They surrendered 10 days later. Now that we are in the middle of the 15th century, we have a solid economy, a strong standing army, so it's time to turn to culture. We start constructing every single cultural building, especially theaters and art schools. It is time to show the world what creations Italy is capable of. 2 years later, we reach 2,700 professional soldiers, and they are ready to go against the Papal States once again. This time, the war should be shorter, as we have a line of forts ready in the mountain. It doesn't miss, Rome quickly falls. But their capital is now in Avignon, so we'd have to go deep into the Papal State and Florence to end the war. Hopefully, our great amount of cannons give us a lot of siege bonus. A few years later, the war is once again a great success. We grab Spoleto, Velletri, and the Rome region. It's 1437 now, and the age of discovery starts. So obviously, we pick the military focus to be ready for the Italian wars. And we finally annex Sicily in 1439, allowing us to form the kingdom of the two Sicilies. The last event of the game is Serbia, our faithful allies, launching a war against the Byzantine Empire, or at least its remnants. And obviously, we go forth and support this war to maybe grab a foothold in Greece. Now that we have a solid economy, a strong army, and a strong culture, maybe establishing this foothold will be our first way to avoid the danger of an Ottoman Empire.
Two stories. Two journeys from 1337 to 1444. Two journeys that have manipulated the world and shaped the future of a nation. But these are just two stories in the sea of tales that you can tell in Europa Universalis V. Who will you conquer first? Will you become an economic powerhouse? Or will your dynasty rise to dominate the world? The choice is yours and the story will be yours to tell, as long as you remember to be ambitious. Wishlist Europa Universalis V today, and we'll see you in the next video.